समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है, अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है, अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Shadows are looming large over the Quad, partly because of the difficulties in the relationship between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump.
When it comes to managing Donald Trump, I mean, that is going to be her main test, right?
He wants a different world from the one that President Biden wanted. So there will be some changes there. The better question is how does the global economy change as a result of the tensions between China and the US?
He has his eye on that rare earth deal with China, but he's starting with these quick wins. What do you think? I mean, is he building up that moment?
In the new Japanese administration of Takaichi Sanae, is that the focus inside her leadership team, there's a lot of a number of people who take a very strong interest in Taiwan's security, as did she herself. Quad has a fantastic sort of ability to sort of shape shift. It's not an Asian NATO.
What do you see Trump getting from South Korea? Because as you know, the real problem there is that they simply don't have the money to invest in the US. Welcome to the WorldView with Swasti. As you know, US President Donald Trump has arrived in Asia for a fast-paced week of diplomatic meetings, highlighted by a highly anticipated encounter with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Now, the main focus of his visit is certainly the trade war, but Trump has already touched down in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, as the ASEAN summit has started there on Sunday, which was 26th October. And he is also going to be meeting then the new Prime Minister in Japan, Sanae Takaichi. And finally, he'll go to South Korea, where he's going to be meeting Xi himself. Now, there are many, many key questions. What will be his successes? What are going to be the failures? And what are going to be the challenges? And to unpack all of this, I have an excellent expert with me today. I have Robert Ward, who is currently Director, Geoeconomics and Strategy. He's the Japan Chair and Senior Fellow for Japanese Security Studies at IISS, which is the famous think tank Institute for International and Strategic Studies in London. He's previously served as editorial director of the Economist Intelligence Unit for about 6 years. And in 2025, he has come out with a wonderful book. It's called Evaluating Japan's New Grand Strategy. And therein, he talks a lot about the security situation in and around the region. So welcome to the WorldView, Swasti, and we dive straight in to Donald Trump's Asia visit. So very happy to have you here with me today, Robert. What a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time out.
Well, thank you for taking the time as well. I'm very pleased to be here.
All right. So, I mean, a lot is happening in Asia. And why don't we just start from Mr. Donald Trump's visit to Asia? And, he's going to be spending 1 week in the region. It's already started. So let's just first hear from you your thoughts on Trump's Asia pivot or the visit.
Well, very important visit, obviously, particularly given the background of US-China tensions, and it's right across the spectrum. This bilateral, these bilateral tensions. So President Trump is visiting Malaysia. He's in Japan now, and obviously he then goes to South Korea. All really important countries for just trying to, I suppose, for Trump to build support for his position on China, and of course to work out his strategy a bit more towards China, given how the other countries are positioning themselves as well.
And that's quite interesting, Robert, because, you're sitting in London, but of course you are a Japan expert. I have come to know you as a Japan expert. You speak and write fluent Japanese and all that. So we are going to come to, of course, Japan and Sanae Takaichi's historic win there. But can you also help the viewers understand, because during his first term, he made a visit to Asia, right? That was many years ago. Can we just also have, like, from you, this observation and this understanding of how is the best way to compare? Of course, geopolitical context has changed radically. But having said that, there was Trump a few years ago in Asia. Now he's again in Asia. What exactly has changed?
Well, what has changed is the entire global geopolitical backdrop. So when he first went, the world was a very different place. What we have now, of course, is Russia's illegal full-scale invasion of Ukraine. So Europe's biggest war since 1945. That's still raging. We have North Korean troops helping Russia in its efforts against Ukraine. That's unprecedented. We have China really ramping up the pressure on Taiwan. That's obviously gives lots of concerns. And then, of course, we have overlaying all of that, we have US trade policy, which has really shifted since Trump took office for the second time. So a really very different backdrop to Trump's visit this time.
Right. And I think, in my understanding, how Mr. Trump is going about this entire visit, of course, he's going to be spending a week in the region. But he started with the quick wins, hasn't he? I mean, with the Cambodia, Thailand deal, and now probably South Korea. And Lee, ever since he's come to office, has been trying to spend as much time as possible in the Oval Office, trying to flatter Trump and say all sorts of nice things. So what I see is that Trump is obviously he has his eye on that rare earth deal with China. But he's starting with these quick wins. What do you think? I mean, is he building up that momentum?
Well, for him, there's a lot of important things to tick off here. One is ASEAN, which is sort of the pivotal region in the Indo-Pacific. So clearly that's a vital strategic interest for the US. The Japan relationship, also very, very important, and he's acknowledged that a number of times, as has his leadership team, has his cabinet. And then, of course, you have South Korea, and President Trump has one eye, presumably, on North Korea as well. So there's a lot of business that Trump has to transact here, hence the fact he's spending a week in the region, as you just said.
Right. So let's start with first South Korea. What do you see Trump getting from South Korea? Because, as you know, the real problem there is that they simply don't have the money to invest in the US, as Donald Trump has been demanding. And if they were to do that, I think, I don't know how they're going to manage it. So your quick takes on South Korea, and then, of course, we go to Japan.
Well, there's the investment that President Trump wants in the US. That's contentious, obviously, in South Korea, particularly given the issues around the employees of the South Korean firm based in the US the other day. The way that the workers were treated, which of course has provoked quite a lot of consternation in South Korea. I think the key thing there, though, is what President Trump will do with regard to North Korea. So President Lee, South Korea's president, he comes from the progressive side of South Korean politics, which traditionally have been more open to engagement with North Korea. So there is quite a lot of concern, I think, in Japan that there's going to be some deal done with North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, that may result in US troops being withdrawn from South Korea or whatever, which may change the strategic balance in the region, particularly in Northeast Asia, which obviously is a great concern to Japan. So the South Korea visit will have a lot of components in it all at the same time, ranging from the economy to North Korea to South Korean security to the US military presence in South Korea. So it's quite a complicated choreography, if you like.
Oh, that's fascinating, because that would really redefine and sort of, recolor a lot of the equations, the strategic equations that we are familiar with, at least in the region. So, really looking forward to that. And now, very quickly, now let's talk a little bit about Japan, because that, of course, is, as you know, I mean, that's your Japan chair, and you've been a keen watcher of Japan for so long. Sanae Takaichi has just come. Her win is historic, but so are her challenges, of course. Now, a little bit about, let's start with Abe's legacy. Right? I mean, how much of Shinzo Abe's legacy in terms of the 3 arrows of Abenomics, or, the pivot to Indo-Pacific, you know how it was. Abe's friendship with Donald Trump was well known, maybe perhaps more tilted towards Trump than towards Abe, but nonetheless. So now, first, let's talk about Abe's legacy. How much of that legacy do you see Sanae Takaichi taking forward?
So with you mentioned the three arrows, which is Abe's Abenomics economic policy platform. Policy is sort of the economic environment has moved on since Abe introduced those three arrows back over 10 years ago now. So you have interest rates rising in Japan. Abe-san wanted interest rates as low as possible. You have so what Abe called a sort of flexible fiscal policy, which Prime Minister Takaichi is trying to continue, but obviously Japan's economic issues are slightly different from when Abe introduced his flexible economic policy. The arrow that never really hit home was structural reform of those three arrows, so monetary policy, fiscal policy, and then structural reform. And I suspect that Takaichi it doesn't have that much room, that much time at the moment for really sort of deep structural reform, given all the other sort of things that she's prioritized in her policy platform, not least security, which has a really important sort of central position there. But as you said, Swasti, she is very close to Abe. He was her mentor, if you like, so she can be described as a protege of his. They had a very close relationship. Abe was very supportive of her and her candidacy in previous leadership elections to be leader. So she will try to, I think, continue Abe's legacy where she can. And I think for the longevity of her premiership, I think one thing will be very important for her, which will be to be as pragmatic as Abe was. So Abe had a reputation as being a sort of ideologue, and he had very clear conservative policies. But when he was in government in his second period in office, 2012 to 2020, he was pragmatic above everything else, which allowed him to implement a lot of policy. So I think Takaichi-san will also have to be pragmatic to ensure that her premiership is sort of long-lived, certainly longer lived than was Ishiba's before her.
Now, quickly, you mentioned that she's going to be as pragmatic as possible. Of course, we saw a bit of that political restraint sort of creeping in the very early days of her being elected as the prime minister, because she chose to not go to the Yasukuni shrine, despite sort of, being having that image of Nippon Kaigi and, that hardliner. So that early hint is very, very obvious. But when it comes to managing Donald Trump, that is going to be her main test, right? That's what I also wrote, that her first test, the main test, is when she meets Mr. Trump. And she has already been saying, for example, she has been saying many pro-Trump things. She's been sort of thanking Trump. She's been saying that Japan is willing to shoulder more responsibility when it comes to security. That's precisely what America wants. There are 50,000 American troops in Japan, the highest ever for any country. Now, apart from all this, there is also this contentious $550 billion investments that America wants Japan to do there. How do you see that playing out? Do you see this as going to be all an equal distribution, or do you see there would be certain things that are going to be easier for her to pull off and certain things which are going to be very difficult?
Well, you're absolutely right. This is her first big foreign policy test, and what a test. With the most important relationship that Japan has and a leader like President Trump. So my sense is that given her closeness to the late Abe Shinzo, and given how Trump, every meeting with Prime Minister Ishiba, so as Prime Minister Takaichi's predecessor, every meeting pretty much, Trump mentioned how much he liked Abe and how what a great leader he was. So I think that this will stand her in very good stead with President Trump. Also, she's on the right of Japan's political spectrum, so I think that she and Trump will share certain views about certain things. So my sense is, as I said, I think that this relationship will go relatively well. One of the things that she really is going to prioritize is Japan's defense policy, security policy, bringing forward that 2% of GDP defense spending target to this financial year, from financial year 2027. That will be noted, I'm sure, by the Trump administration with great favor. Also, other plans to boost defense capabilities and so on. So for Japan, you mentioned the 500 billion investment that the previous Japanese administration committed to. I'm sure that given the importance of the security relationship with the US for Japan, that the Takaichi administration isn't going to try and upset the apple cart. I think the focus will really be on the security issues, and you can see this in her leadership lineup. You can see this sort of importance of security issues in the coalition agreement with Ishin, the opposition party that's now cooperating with her LDP outside the cabinet. So security will be the issue, and I think she'll try to ensure that economic relations remain obviously difficult for Japan, given all the tariffs and the investment demands from the US, but that economic relations remain as smooth as they can.
That was interesting, Robert. But as you can see that Takaichi has made security and defense the centerpiece of her foreign policy and administration. I also heard I read certain remarks by her saying that she is going to ramp up more support for Ukraine. Under that support, Japan is going to provide more and more support apart from the lethal aid. So, of course, the military aid, of course, remains a red line. But do you think under Takaichi that line perhaps could get a little blurred, considering that there is a lot in lethal aid that can also classify as dual use, etc.? Because Japan is sort of transforming within. So, do you think there is any correlation to that?
So I think that she will push the lines as far as she can. Her political position is weak, so she's in this coalition with Ishin, as I mentioned earlier. They're not in a majority in Parliament. She has her own LDP is fractured. It's not a sort of cohesive monolithic bloc. So her domestic political position is weak, which will put constraints on just how radically she can act. I think emotionally, I think she would like to give Ukraine as much support as she is able. But I suspect, as I've just said, that the constraints will force her to be more pragmatic. But certainly in terms of strategic signaling, which is also a really important part of having an effective strategy, she's being very clear. So she's, as I said, bringing forward the spending of 2% of GDP on defense, bringing that forward. The coalition document has a special chapter on defense issues. So she's being as clear, and of course she's going to renew the or sort of change the three strategic documents, one of which is the National Security Strategy, which were all published in 2022. She's going to have them reviewed and renewed by the end of next year. So I think she'll be very clear on the strategic signaling, but in terms of what she can actually do, I suspect her domestic political constraints will kind of limit her room for maneuver.
Right. And now let's come to China, because, of course, that is perhaps what Donald Trump is there for. Other things are somewhere in the background, Of course, despite all the important strategic partnerships that America has with Japan or with South Korea, it's really China, it's really the rare earth deal. Now, how far do you think that China, I mean, of course, Donald Trump also knows that Xi Jinping has some troubles back home. He has high unemployment, he has a real estate crisis, he has a local government debt population that is not really willing to spend as much in China. And yet, Xi Jinping is not willing to blink either. So how do you think this is going to work out? Because this is a major, I think, breakthrough that everybody in the world is waiting for. The markets are waiting for, the developing economies are waiting for, Americans, the Chinese, everybody. Now, how do you see this playing out?
Well, as you just said, Swasti, very, very correctly, China has quite a lot of economic problems of its own. I mean, it has many characteristics that look like those of Japan in the 1990s, as Japan entered its own lost decade. So high debt, demographic falling population, etc., etc. So China goes into this so not as strong, I think, as some commentators would have it. I saw in one very well-known publication last week that they were arguing that China's winning this trade war. I don't think that's right. I think nobody wins this war. There are a lot of losers here. But each country, China has strengths, weaknesses, US has strengths and weaknesses. This is a really sort of much longer term issue. And I think it's too early to say. Probably not the right question actually to ask who's winning. I think the better question is how does the global economy change as a result of the tensions between China and the US. In the short term, there may be some deal done with rare earths, tariffs, or whatever. This will be, whatever deal comes out, will be unstable. Deals are just that. They're deals. They're not structured treaties, agreements, and so on. So given the real sort of depths of difference between in the way that China and the US view the world in many respects, I think it's too early to say that Trump's visit and meeting with Xi Jinping and so on will be the thing that actually solves all the problems. These are deep-rooted global structural issues to do with how the world is changing. So this is sort of one more stage in this sort of much longer journey.
Okay, one more thing, but of course we understand that it is actually wrong sometimes to look at these extremely complex situations in terms of a binary or trying to find absolute answers, like clear-cut answers about what is going to happen, because politicians and statesmen are always going to make some statements. The real proof of that pudding is going to lie into all the other sort of unfolding that comes much later, and I completely agree with you there. But there are a couple of things. One is that yes, China is dependent on the United States for advanced semiconductors and chips, and US is dependent on China for the materials, the rare earths that go into making them. But then there's also a question of Taiwan and the commitment to Taiwan. I mean, now I know there is a reason why Marco Rubio has been getting this question and again, which is that, are you willing to sort of sacrifice the security of Taiwan for some economic benefit? And he has gone on record and said no, but okay, what is your reading? Because Donald Trump, he's a difficult person, right? He likes to pluck the low-hanging fruits. Yeah.
So this is obviously one of the big issues that Japan is worried about. In the same way that South Korea is worried that US troops will leave South Korea, there'll be some deal cut between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. So is Japan, and obviously Taiwan, worried about sort of similar, some grand bargain being struck by Xi Jinping and Donald Trump that sort of sells Taiwan down the line and then sort of clearly changes the strategic balance in the region hugely. One of the interesting things is in the new Japanese administration of Takaichi Sanae is that the focus inside her leadership team. There's a number of people who take a very strong interest in Taiwan's security, as did she herself. And in the coalition agreement with Ishin, I noted that there is in the economic security paragraph, they're going to focus on building the resilience of submarine cables in the southwestern region of Japan, which is next door to Taiwan. So this whole focus, Japan's strategic focus on Taiwan, on its own southwest region, that will continue under Takaichi. So there's going to be a lot of focus from Tokyo, obviously from Taipei as well, on how Donald Trump situates Taiwan within his broader desire to work out how to deal with Xi Jinping and the People's Republic.
But considering that he strikes a deal with the North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, and that is going to fundamentally change the relevance of United States posturing, vis-a-vis the Korean Peninsula, it's in China's backyard, and so many things. Now, with this kind of a shift underway, or at least as we are sort of, discussing, it could be underway, where does it leave the future of the quadrilateral security dialogue, the Quad, between India, Australia, US, and Japan? During the first Trump administration, that kind of became the centerpiece, isn't it? I mean, his pivot to Indo-Pacific was something that everybody was talking about, and that's how the Indian side got so confident of Donald Trump coming back and having an extremely smooth, I would say, a win-win strategic dialogue with his administration. And of course, all of that has kind of come crashing down. But where does that leave the future of Quad?
Well, in the short term, shadows are looming large over the Quad, partly because of the difficulties in the relationship between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump. That I think is a bit of a blocker at the moment on further development of the Quad. It had looked quite promising at the beginning of Trump's second administration, but the tariffs and US policy now towards Pakistan as well, that sort of complicated everything between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump. So in the short term, I think the outlook is quite uncertain. Of course, this only benefits China because the Quad has a fantastic sort of ability to sort of shape shift. It's not an Asian NATO in a million years. It's not an Asian NATO. Such a thing is not possible, but it is a very flexible strategic amplifier for all four countries in it. So any problems with the Quad, I think, is bad news for the region. Certainly bad news for Japan, which has put a lot of effort into the Quad, and of course Abe Shinzo is one of the sort of originators of the idea of the Quad in the first place.
From your answer, I gather that you're trying to say that it's basically the Modi-Trump equation which is not working out in the manner in which everybody expected is the real dampener for Quad. Is that the only thing, or do you see that this kind of complements Donald Trump's preoccupation with the Middle East and also with the Western Hemisphere? He's sending ships to take down perhaps the Venezuelan dictator, etc., etc. I mean, is it just the Modi factor, or is it that it just kind of adds up because anyway he was sort of preoccupied and not so serious about the Indo-Pacific in this term?
I think it's partly the Modi-Trump factor. I think that is a major thing. I mean, Donald Trump is very sort of personal in his relationships, so that is, I think, as I said, a shadow over the Quad. I think, assuming, and as one hopes, the Quad gets back on the road again, and things move on. The Trump administration will want to make changes in the complexion of the Quad. I mean, that's obvious. I mean, he wants a different world from the one that President Biden wanted. So there will be some changes there. But I think the focus of the Trump administration on China, and it does acknowledge that China is such an important issue for the US and for the world. I hope that allows the Quad a sort of new lease of life in the very short term, because of course this, as I said, is a really important amplifier for all four countries in the Quad. And this is an enormous region, and the US cannot do what it wants to do alone. So it needs the support of Australia, Japan, and India, obviously, in creating stability and preserving stability in the region.
Right. And before I let you go, Robert, because you've been so generous with your answers, but I have to talk about your latest book. And this is about Japan's grand strategy. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this?
So, thank you, Swasti. One of the things I wanted to do writing this book was to a couple of things. One is to tell the world why Japan is so strategically important for Asia and beyond. Japan, for many people, is quite remote. A lot of people think that it's still stuck in this sort of in the rut that it was in the 1990s, early 2000s. They think that it's not. They think it's pacifist. There's a lot of misunderstandings about Japan. So I wanted
stereotypes. There are many stereotypes about Japan. Yeah.
There are many stereotypes about Japan, but Japan has moved on hugely, largely, I think, to the very long second administration of Abe Shinzo, and is now absolutely pivotal for regional security, regional stability in the region. So I wanted to highlight that, and I also wanted to answer the question: Is Japan doing enough with its strategic change, spending more on its military, economic security policy, and so on, to fulfill its goal of its strategic goals of preserving stability and so on in the region? So I wanted to answer that question as well, and I concluded broadly, yes. but there are some issues that Japan has to cope with. I won't give spoiler alerts to your viewers. They'll have to read the book to find out what the issues are. But I wanted to just make the point that Japan really, really matters now for everybody.
Well, on that note, Robert, I have to really thank you deeply for agreeing to speak to me for the Worldview with Swasti, and for sort of laying bare all these complexities that Donald Trump is going to be perhaps giving us a sneak peek into in the week that he is spending in our region. So we'll be back to discuss, more on what really went right and what really went wrong. But at this stage, I have to thank you, and I'm very, very grateful for your time.
Thank you, Swasti, and thank you for your super questions.